In this video, we're going to go over how to build a creative engine that is optimized for Meta's ad algorithms. But first, a couple of disclaimers. One, Andromeda and these algorithms are not new. Andromeda has been used as a buzzword for 6 months, a year or more. And it's important to understand that while people are talking about it now, it is not something that was just implemented. These ad algorithms are ever changing, but Meta did overhaul their systems, implementing new ad algorithms and delivery systems. Andromeda is just one piece of that. Now, you don't need to understand all of the intricacies of this delivery system, of these algorithms. I'm going to call out a couple of key pieces that are really important for you. One is that this delivery system is meant to pair ads with specific users. So view it as each user having its own assistant that is going and handpicking the ads for them. They're meant to be hyper-specific, which means your ads need to be hyper-specific and messaged in a very, very clear way. That will not only allow the users to understand if the ad is for them, but more importantly, it's going to tell Meta exactly who your ad is for. And that gets into the other very important piece, which is creative. Creative differentiation has always been important, but in the past, you were allowed to be a little bit more iterative. You could make little changes, have little alterations, upload the same graphic in 3 different colors and see which one performed best. Now they're looking for bigger swings, more differentiation between the ads, completely different angles, completely different approaches. That is what makes it harder for teams, especially small teams. And that is why we are building a creative engine that allows you to iterate as often and as optimally as possible for Andromeda. So let's dig in. This is a 6-step system. First step is strategy and design. Pretty straightforward. Second, implementation. Then we go into monitoring the Andromeda signals. Next is the proper reporting and analysis. This is what you're probably already doing. After that, we get into creative iteration, and then the final step is implementation, and then repetition of the process. Now, looking at this system, it does look like a standard creative engine. Now, where it differs is in the details and how you approach each step. When we're starting with strategy and design, you need to think of which key angles you want to start with. This is your foundation. Now, given that you already have active ad campaigns and active system, how you would approach this is coming up with completely fresh angles. So start by looking at your previous high performers. What concepts have driven the best results? Take those and think about how to approach them with fresh eyes. And you can still re-implement those high performers against new creatives. Now, we're not just talking about high performing ads here. We also need to consider the high performing organic content. One of the best things that you can do is use your organic performance to inform how you approach ads. With organic engagements, people are going to naturally tell you what they like and what they don't like. A timely example is if you use AI to generate an organic post, and you see that you have a lot of feedback in the comments saying, we don't want this, we don't want AI. That is your audience telling you directly that if you serve them ads using AI, they will probably be less likely to convert. So consider what posts are getting the most engagement on your social channels and use that to inform your angles. The next one is not new either. Look at your competitors. What are they doing? What might be working for them? Spend some time in the ads library, looking at different competitors, seeing what angles they're testing. Don't assume that what they are testing is working, but use it to spark ideas for your own creative. Now, we already touched on this point a bit. Think about your customer feedback. What do they say about why they chose your product or your service? Go look at your reviews and look for those angles that you haven't considered yet. Oftentimes, there will be customers that love your product for a reason that you hadn't considered yet. This is a new angle, and you can also pull in these reviews for your social proof. Think of creative ways to present that social proof to your audience. Now, this next one is something that I see a lot of people skip over, and that is cross-industry research. It makes sense that your instinct is going to be focusing on your competitors in your industry. But in the digital space, you are competing against everyone else that is bidding for the user's attention. It doesn't matter what industry they're in, what they're selling, you are going up against them. So consider what creative concepts might be working in other industries. This can sometimes be easier because then you're able to broaden your research and look at the ad campaigns that are being talked about online or in publications. Now, the next step is pretty obvious, but you need to establish your ad formats. The default here tends to be we need video. which is true. But in many cases, and for many businesses, statics can convert at a higher rate than video. And video plays a bit of a different role. Both are very important in any user journey. Static images are able to communicate the value immediately, while video content allows for longer form explanations, storytelling, things like that. I would suggest aligning your angle with your placement and with your format, and piecing those together to produce optimal ads. Now, the final piece of step 1 is developing your creatives. Next, we go into implementation. This is pretty self-explanatory. The one thing that I want to call out here is if you are using this creative engine to really increase your output, then you need to think about using consistent naming conventions. These naming conventions can make reporting much easier for yourself down the line. So templating not only the campaign name, but also the ad set and the ad. So in reporting, it's very clear which ad you're looking at. Along with this, of course, you need to consider your conversion tracking. I like using UTMs to make sure that I can see the performance for each individual ad from the platform level all the way through to website conversion. Now, step 3 is where we get into more Andromeda specific tactics. For these new ad delivery systems, the first 24 to 48 hours are absolutely critical. This period is when Meta is looking at the ad to determine the potential value. And further, it's looking for specific engagement signals that determine whether or not the ad is worth scaling. So let's talk about the key signals that you need to monitor. These would be the initial engagement patterns. And now what I mean by that is how quickly are people engaging when they see the ad? Are you getting comments? Are you getting shares? Are you getting likes? Things like that. And beyond that, you need to look at your engagement depth. Are people only clicking, or are they sharing it, saving it, or spending a significant amount of time on your content? Now, it's just as important that we talk about what you don't need to react to. First, do not pay attention to your cost metrics in the first 48 hours. Those are not indicative of final performance. There is still a learning phase within these systems. Next, do not make decisions based on very small sample sizes. If you get 10 to 20 clicks and you're already feeling a panic, then you need to step away. And final, which is typically the hardest, is do not pay too much attention to the immediate conversion performance. Again, focus on those engagement signals first, and then the conversion optimization comes later. Now let's dig into step 4, the actual reporting and analysis. That previous step was just keeping an eye on things. But now, about 3 to 5 days after these ads have launched, it's time to do the proper reporting. This window allows for statistical significance and engagement metrics, multiple delivery cycles and audience exposure, and clear pattern identification. And when we get into analyzing the ads, it's important that we don't just focus on standard metrics. We need to look a bit further. But when it comes to standard metrics, this is what I suggest you look at. First is delivery efficiency. Now that would be your CPM, that would be your spend distribution, likely the metrics that you are used to looking at. Next is your high intent engagement. We talked about this a bit before. So those are the saves and the shares. It's going beyond the click, beyond the like, even beyond the comment. And then finally, look at your established funnel metrics that you've already set and that you typically look at. So that might be your ROAS and your conversion rate. It might be your through plays, anything that is relevant to your specific campaign. Now we'll get into the Andromeda specific signals. This is where saves and shares come up again. Both of these are very strong signals. We also need to continue to consider the quality of the engagement. So those are the comments and the reactions and the time spent with the content. This is telling us whether or not the users are enjoying it. And if the individual ad delivery system that we talked about understands who your ad is for. And then the last piece here is your delivery patterns, similar to your efficiency, but we just want to keep an eye on if Meta is consistently showing your ads or if it's reducing delivery. Now, after you assess those items, you can kill your underperformers. That doesn't mean forever, because it's always good to bring them back, test them against other things. And then you want to identify your winners for iteration. So those ads that are performing well based on these metrics, those need to be flagged so that you understand which direction you need to go with your iterations. Speaking of iterations, we are now on step 5. So this is where we start expanding on those winning concepts. You don't want to just let them run and see how long they last before they fatigue. You want to take them and say, how can I make this different? How can I make it better? And keep iterating. And remember, it has to be different enough that Meta recognizes it as a different concept. This is where you can pull in new imagery or video content. So this is asking yourself, how can you have a different visual approach to the same concept? Next, you consider expanding or strengthening your messaging. Can you come up with longer or shorter variants of successful copy? Try out different headlines while maintaining that core concept, and then try pulling in some additional value propositions or benefits. Now, the design alternatives can get pretty detailed, so this is trying out different visual hierarchies, different CTAs, button colors, or trying out different overlays and things like that. Again, this is not taking the same ad, swapping out just the text, and running it again. It has to be different enough to be seen as a different approach. And then finally here, you need to introduce new angles. Every single creative cycle, you need to have new angles to introduce to your campaigns. And that takes us into our final step, which is implementation and repetition. So you add the new creatives to the campaigns, and then you're back at step 3, monitoring those Andromeda signals. Now, the big question for this creative engine is, how often do I need to go through this cycle? At minimum, I suggest every 2 weeks. So that means every 2 weeks, you are uploading new ads into your campaigns with fresh angles and new iterations. Now, it is optimal that you would be doing this weekly. That isn't reasonable for small teams with low capacity, but you have enough time between these steps that you would be able to achieve that if you have enough capacity to do so. Now, high performance teams and large teams are typically going to do this probably twice a week, that they're running through things, which is great, but that is typically accompanied by a very large budget, which allows for them to go through those learning cycles much quicker. So this is the full 6-step creative engine. What I like most about this is that it is adaptable for any size team. So if you are a solo founder, if you are a small team, or if you're a large team, you can take this and adapt it to fit your own needs and your own capabilities. If you're interested in learning more about how to optimize for Andromeda for the Meta Ads delivery system, we do have a full guide that I will link below. If you use the code INDEX, you can get $12 off, so it's a great deal. But it walks through much more than this. It does also include all of my detailed notes, so you get all of this information, as well as a ton more on everything about Andromeda, anything that you would really need with none of the junk, none of the scare tactics. So check that out if you want it, and have fun building your creative engine.